Hi, everyone. Welcome to SNAP 101, What New Advocates Should Know, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click Show Captions in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time, please use the Q&A tab, also in the bottom taskbar. With that, I'll pass it off to Salaam Bhatti, SNAP Director at FRAC. Take it away, Salaam.
Thanks so much, Steve, and hello, America. Welcome to SNAP 101, What New Advocates Should Know. And I just want to start off at the top, apologizing for the sound of my voice, coming off of a sore throat. So maybe I sound like Kelly Clarkson, maybe I sound like Batman. But either way, we're going to go through this and have a great time together, learning a little bit about SNAP and really setting the foundation for what we should know, especially right now in a time of budget reconciliation. We did this presentation at the Anti-Hunger Policy Conference just a couple weeks ago, and we were very happily surprised to see that over half the audience, and that doesn't mean like 5 out of 10 people, but literally there were hundreds of people. It was the biggest audience I've ever seen. There was more people than I've ever seen with less than 2 years of advocacy experience within SNAP. So that was really refreshing to see. So we really wanted to make sure that we could use the same presentation modified for the current times, because every single day something new is happening. We really wanted to make sure that we were able to get this out to as many new advocates as possible. So if you've been in the space for a year, 2 years, less than 3 years, then this is the place for you. And there is no such thing as a dumb question. There should be a Q&A opportunity at the bottom, a button or something for it. And you can even ask questions anonymously if that helps you feel all right to ask whatever questions you have. So we are going to be answering all the 101 questions. If there's a 201 question or a 3 or 401 question, we'll take that offline. We'll be able to see all the Q&As and the transcripts and everything afterwards, so we can circle back afterwards and even maybe help inform future webinars, other blogs, other resources too, because FRAC is here to serve you. We really want to make sure we can do the best for that. I'm really excited to be joined by Amanda Berry. She has a wealth of experience in this space in a really fun way. She's not fun, in a very masterful way. She's the Food Security Policy Manager right now at Empower, Missouri. And she has a master's in human rights with a focus on food and nutrition security. She spent over a decade as a farm owner operator and teaching food sovereignty before branching out into policy work. So really just a wealth of information and knowledge Amanda is bringing to the table, and Empower Missouri has been hiding her. So we're really excited to meet you here.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. In case you're unfamiliar with FRAC, hello there. We are the Food Research and Action Center, the leading national nonprofit organization working to eradicate poverty-related hunger and really doing it through strengthening and protecting the federal nutrition programs. So if you're a new advocate in this space, then you've probably had to explain your work to your loved ones. And it's probably been a bit difficult. Like, it's taken my mom and dad quite a bit of time to understand that I'm trying to protect a program that helps put food on the table, because they're like, people want to cut food assistance in the richest country in the world? Like, yeah, fortunately. So here we are. The work is mysterious and it's important. So let's go into a little bit of an introduction about what's going on. What's the state of play here? It's really the big question of, imagine having to decide between paying rent and putting food on the table. The whole the metaphor, or the allegory of rent eats first. So when it comes to people who are rent burdened, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income on rent, it's really hard to have enough budget left over to put food on the table. So that's where SNAP comes in, and it really provides a great, just dedicated budget for food. So it's a great step in the right direction. But of course, as advocates, we're always working to protect what we have and strengthen so we can get to where we need to be to really help make those benefits more adequate. Now, why is SNAP so important right now? Well, The USDA puts out this annual report about food security. And the most recent one showed us that about 3 years in a row, as of 2023, their food insecurity has been rising. And 18 million households experienced food insecurity. So that's an alarming rate, especially in a country as wealthy as America. 6.8 million faced very low food security. And this means that they just didn't have enough money, or they didn't have enough food in their house in the past 30 days. This is also more concerning as as the 2024 report will come out later this year, because food prices are rising. And we are also seeing the end of the pandemic relief really starting to set in affecting these households. So we're going to be seeing, we anticipate some really bad numbers. Now, what is SNAP? SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It is the largest anti-hunger program in the country, and it's been helping over 42 million people put food on the table every single month. It's a wonderful program that impacts every single congressional district, every single state, and every single state is able to benefit from the federal dollars that come into the state. What it does is it provides financial assistance for food purchases, and it ensures that families who have low incomes are able to access food. The way it is provided is through an EBT card, known as it's an electronic benefits transfer card. That's what EBT stands for. It's currently a magnetic stripe card. You swipe it, could have a 4-digit PIN, and that's how you process it. Kind of like an old school debit card. Amanda?
Yeah, I'm kind of a data person. Salaam, thank you for inviting me to join you, and thank you for all of you who are here with us. And just very quickly, I wanted to give some numbers to go with this. Salaam already said 42 million people are participating. And to put that in perspective, nationally, 4 in 5, which is 79% of SNAP households, they include either a child, an elderly individual, or a non-elderly individual that has a disability. And these households consist of 88% of all SNAP participants, and they receive 83% of all of the SNAP benefits. Most SNAP households live in deep poverty. 73% had a gross monthly income at or below 100% of the federal poverty level, which is a significantly low income. And 86% of all SNAP benefits go to these households. And then we're talking about benefits, and we'll get into that more later, but just as a high-level overview, the average SNAP household receives a monthly benefit of $332. That's $177 per person based on the average SNAP household size of 1.9. And yes, I'm sure we'd be able to share all these numbers out afterwards.
Yeah, and also highlighting that a lot of people don't know that the average daily SNAP benefit per person is about $6.16. So it's a very modest amount. It's nothing extravagant. And so it's very important to, let people know that in your advocacy. So this is, how did we get to all of that we just discussed about these numbers? SNAP has a rich history through this country. It's really started in the early 20th century, and it really grew from a pilot program that started out as being something called food stamps. And food stamps were something that you had to initially purchase, and there was 2 different colors. I think it was blue and orange, and they did different things. And ultimately, Jimmy Carter, who recently passed away, he eliminated that purchasing requirement. Later on, the program was renamed to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP. And I call it the Prince of the Welfare World, because every time SNAP is mentioned, it's always SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. But it hasn't been called food stamps since 2008. That's over 17 years ago. Somebody who was born in 2008 is about to graduate high school next year. Sorry to make fellow millennials and other older generations feel a little older, but that's unfortunately the case. So really, a lot of times when we're doing media interviews, the journalist might ask about food stamps or use the word food stamps, but it's called SNAP. We've recently seen from research from Hart polling that there is no major difference when it comes to how voters want to protect programs, whether it's called food stamps or SNAP. So that's kind of nice to see, because we had initially, well, the change had happened initially because there was like a negative association associated with the phrase food stamps. So, it is what it is, but it's called SNAP. It might be called something else in other states, like California, it's called CalFresh. So just keep an eye out that you might have a different name in your state. Amanda?
So something that you probably do not know about me, I have half of a degree in history, and I kind of love history. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the history of the program. Let me know if you start glossing over and I lose you a little. Um, the idea for the first food stamp program is credited to various people, but most notably the Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace, and the program's first administrator, Milo Perkins. And I kind of like this quote because this was the birth of the program. Perkins is quoted as saying, "We got a picture of a gorge with farm surpluses on one side of a cliff and undernourished city folks with outstretched hands on the other side. We set out to find a practical way to build a bridge across that chasm." So the program operated by permitting people, as Salaam was saying, to buy orange stamps equal to their normal food expenditures. And for every dollar worth of orange stamps that they purchased, they were given 50 cents worth of blue stamps as a bonus. And orange stamps could be used to buy any food, and blue stamps could only be used to buy food determined by the department to be surplus, agricultural surplus. So over the course of nearly 4 years, the first FSP reached approximately 20 million people at one time or another in nearly half of the counties throughout the entire United States. Peak participation was 4 million at a total cost of $262 million. The program ended in the spring of 1943. And since the conditions that had brought the program into being, which was unmarketable food surplus and widespread unemployment, no longer existed, the program also ceased to exist. And so for about 18 years, there was a lot of studies, a lot of reports, and a lot of legislative proposals that were done attempting to create a more permanent food stamp program because they saw that this was a good thing for Americans. In fulfillment of a campaign promise made in West Virginia, President Kennedy's first executive order called for expanded food distribution. And on February 2nd, 1961, he announced the initiation of food stamp pilot programs. And these pilot programs would retain the requirement that the food stamps be purchased, but eliminated the concepts of the special stamps for surplus foods. A department spokesperson indicated that the emphasis would be on increasing the consumption of perishables. Finally, on January 31st, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson passed the Food Stamp Act as part of the Great Society program, making it permanent. The intention was to improve the use of agricultural overproduction, strengthen the agricultural economy, and improve nutrition levels. By April of 1965, there were more than 500,000 participants, and in less than a decade, that number had increased to 15 million. During this time, participants still had to purchase stamps or coupons based on what the household was expected to allot for food costs. And they were still given a bonus amount determined by their income level. It wasn't until 1977, under President Carter, that the participants were no longer required to purchase stamps, making the program free for participants, and then a national standard of eligibility was also set at that time. By 1981, participation reached a record high of 22.4 million people, leading Congress and the executive branch to begin scrutinizing the program and enacting major legislation in 81 and 82, creating severe cutbacks in the program. This, of course, sharply increased food insecurity throughout the country during the 80s. Recognizing the severe domestic hunger problem led to the creation of the Hunger Prevention Act of 88 and the Mickey Leland Memorial Domestic Hunger Relief Act in 1990, both of which expanded the food stamps program and accessibility, and the latter established the electronic benefit transactions. I'm almost done. 1994 recorded record participation at 27.5 million people, and then the 90s were a period of safety net reform. The Federal Agricultural Improvement and Reform Act, also known as the 1996 Farm Bill, was reauthorized, but significant cuts to the food stamp program were again established, and program participation thus declined. The 2008 Farm Bill committed $10 billion over the course of 10 years, and the program name was then changed from food stamps to the Supplemental Nutrition Program in an effort to combat the stigma that had accumulated over the course of the program. This cycle continued with expansion, record high participation being 28.2 million by 2008, and new highs being recorded every year until 2013. And at that point in 2013, participation had reached 47.6 million. So it's important to note that it was during the early to mid 2000s that many of the nutrition education programs we know as SNAP Ed now also began to be launched. 2014 Farm Bill adjusted work requirements, introduced some new model programs, addressed fraud prevention, and our current SNAP program is regulated under the 2018 Farm Bill, of which 80% of the budget is allocated to the nutrition title. The bill protected the structure and funding of SNAP and rejected all measures to cut benefits and eligibility. And I just also want to note that throughout the history of SNAP, it has maintained a bipartisan status.
Yeah,
and that's
and
what I've got about the history.
Thanks, Amanda. So I wanted to also highlight that for 1996, during the Clinton era welfare reform, that's when this whole idea of time limits, also known as work requirements, was input into food stamps, and with TANF, the temporary assistance for needy families, as well. Also, should add on the history slide what happened in 2018, which is the change to the Thrifty Food Plan. We're going to be talking about that in just a few slides, but wanted to just let you know that that's also on the table. So why are we talking about the history? Why is this so important? It's so that we remember what our potential is to create, not just to create, but to continue to strengthen programs as well. Because right now we are stuck in a moment of being on the defensive nationally. The past 4 months have been really exhausting. And it kind of can set us aback in our minds of, now, are we ever going to get out of this? And we will. We will not be stuck in this place forever. Even in red states, for example, I used to be working in a purple state of Virginia. Amanda's doing some phenomenal work with her colleagues in red state Missouri. There are more opportunities often administratively than there are legislatively. Amanda?
Yeah, so this is an approach that we have to take being in a red state. There's some policy changes that can only occur legislatively, so there's no way around that. And sometimes it's astonishing at how little legislators actually know about the programs and the people that their policies will ultimately impact. As advocates, it's certainly our job to be experts and to educate them as best we can. However, it has been our experience that many changes can also occur at the administrative level. SNAP, for instance, in Missouri is administered by the Missouri Department of Social Services, and the staff at DSS is exceptionally knowledgeable about the programs that they administer, and that in and of itself saves a lot of time and energy when working with them to create policy changes. You're not having to go back to the very beginning and try to explain acronyms and existing program policies. And so we do a lot of investing in building these kinds of relationships, and those relationships can help us collaborate to find and implement really innovative solutions. I know later in the slides, we're going to get into the kinds of advocacy actions that can be done at the administrative level, but it just felt like a really good moment to point out that much of our work is relationship building across a variety of organizations. And one of the best things, my favorite things about working administratively, is you may have the opportunity to work with someone within a department or another organization for most of your career, as opposed to legislators who can just come and go. And so you can really build those human relationships. Thank you.
Excellent point. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Thanks for lifting that up too. So, this is not a presentation that you need to memorize or, furiously take notes. We will share the recording and the PowerPoint with all those who registered. But it kind of just like, gives you a high level overview, like eligibility, right? This is a lot of states have different types of calculators for this. There's snapscreener.com. So we're not really in a place where you have to figure out the whole formula in our head. But just to give you an idea, like this is what eligibility looks like. So we know what the skeleton of the program is. It has a 2 income limit track test. The first is in states that don't have broad-based categorical eligibility passed, also known as SNAP expansion. They have the gross income test is limited to 130% of the federal poverty level. And so somebody who is applying for SNAP first needs to get through that first door, that their income is below, their gross income is below 130%. And then they have to have enough deductions that takes them down to 100% of the federal poverty level after deductions, which is known as the net income test. So once you realize that, it's like, wow, that's really low. You're asking for people who have incredibly low incomes who are going to be the ones who are eligible for this program, when really a lot more people who are in need should be eligible for this program too. Then we go into time limits. Somebody asked a question, why is it called time limits when it's called work requirements, or those two different things? They're the same thing. A requirement to work or work requirement, it's kind of like a pejorative, because what a work requirement is doing is, or what a time limit is doing, is just putting a time limit on a basic human right, which is food. It's saying that those who are able-bodied without dependents, also known as ABODs, typically means people who are fit to work and don't have kids, but ABODs have to work for 3 months in a 36-month period of 80 hours a month. If they are, if they are not working more than 80 hours a month, then they are only able to receive SNAP for 3 months in a 36-month period. So after the third month, if they're not doing enough hours, then not only do they barely have any income, but they have also lost their food assistance. So it's a very precarious moment for people to not have income or food assistance. And when you consider how the average benefit is $6.16 per person per day, it's not a lot. You can't live on that. You're not going to eat good on that little amount. So SNAP is really a supplement. You got to have some other income to be able to make things work. So this whole idea that you have to work within, you can't get it for more than 3 months, is not scientific. It's not mathematically based. It's not nutritional focused. It's really just a made up time limit. And it also has shown, research has shown, that having these time limits doesn't actually promote long-term economic sustainability. And it also doesn't even support people finding high-wage jobs. In fact, if anything, it's forcing people to find whatever job they can, which is typically going to be a low-wage job, which means they're just going to continue to need SNAP. So it doesn't make any sense. It's a nonsensical thing. There's also special considerations for older adults and individuals with disabilities. These households may have a higher gross income threshold, often up to 165% of the federal poverty limit, depending on what the state's policies are. And really, it's important to also note that there's no state that has the same exact SNAP as another state. Every state has a lot of options that they can customize the program with, which we'll talk about in a few slides. But it's really like every state can have an opportunity to learn from each other based on what is working and what's not working as well. There's also deductions that are available that help bring that gross income limit down. So once you can get that net income down even further, then that actually increases the amount people can receive in SNAP benefits. So it's really important to factor in all the deductions that a person can. So if you're both an advocate and also helping people, or you're in an organization that helps people sign up for SNAP, it's important to always look for the medical expenses for older adults and people with disabilities. Make sure you're putting in all the shelter costs and utilities and all that kind of stuff. And also taking in to note that internet expenses can also be deducted as of January this year. And then with regards to immigrants, immigrants are, of course, a touchy issue on the national policy landscape, but in the SNAP space, it's very difficult for immigrants to be eligible for SNAP. And that's because there's a 5-year bar, a 5-year waiting period for lawful permanent residents in America from before they can receive SNAP. So even those who are documented immigrants, very difficult for them to receive SNAP. They have to wait 5 years. There are other immigrants who are eligible immediately, which includes refugees and asylees. There's also a designation of immigrant called parolee. And these are special, designations that come up based on emergency and need. And if you are a parolee, then you wait for a year before you're eligible for SNAP, as long as you're also qualifying in another category, which typically it's a child under 18. So how does it work? Well, it's important to note that there's two different ways that SNAP is funded. There's the state administration of SNAP and the federal benefit of SNAP. The state administration is something that is split 50-50 between the federal government and the state. And in the state, it might have a further breakdown with counties or localities in some way, shape, or form. So that of course varies with every state. And then the federal benefit is 100% fully funded by the federal government. You might be in a state that might have used their own state budget to increase the minimum benefit of $23 to another amount. Maybe your state has done something to help those who are older or have a disability, or maybe your state has done something to help immigrants. But those are different options that the state would utilize their own funds for. It would not be coming from the federal budget. So SNAP isn't a one-size-fits-all program. States have the flexibility to adjust policies. They can test new ideas to better serve their communities. So there's something called state options, and there's also something called demonstration projects. Now, state options there's about, roughly 20 or so state options that states can go through or, go through legislatively or administratively to get. And WeStat does a wonderful annual report in partnership with the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. USDA is the government agency that oversees and administers SNAP. And they publish a report on the options that states have chosen. So it's a really wonderful program. We can link to you if you haven't seen that. We can put that in the chat. But it's a great opportunity for advocates to see what other states are doing. And for you to be able to reach out to other advocates in other states to say, hey, how did you do that? How did you make this work? What did you learn? And all that stuff. So we really want to be able to make sure we're creating a community of advocates across the network so that you can learn from each other and enjoy some best practices. A demonstration project is something different from a state option. It's like not there yet. It's not a state option yet. It's kind of still in the testing phase to see how it goes. And one of those demonstration projects that's almost going to be a state option, maybe in the next Farm Bill, it'll become a state option, is the Elderly Simplified Application Project. It's also known as ESAP, which is the acronym for all the letters. So ESAP is an application for those who are older. And what it does is it decreases the amount of pages that SNAP application is for older adults. And it also gives states the flexibility to increase the recertification period all the way up to 36 months for this group. So it's a great program. It's getting some bipartisan support in the previous Farm Bill to make this into a state option. So we're really excited about that opportunity coming soon, hopefully. So then states don't have to go through the demonstration project waivers. They can make it a state option process instead. Amanda.
Yeah, I was just going to give some examples of in Missouri what we have been working on as far as the state options go. One of them is a legislative only option. Under federal law, there's a lifetime ban on accessing SNAP for persons with previous drug felony convictions. Lots of states, 25 of them and Washington, D.C., have already opted out of this ban. And many more states have modified the ban, including Missouri. But we were able to get a modified ban past about a decade through a lot of bipartisan support. And then, and this sometimes happens, we realized that the way that the modification was written, that it is still almost impossible to access SNAP with a drug felony. So for the last few years, we've been trying to opt out of the ban completely. And again, it has been true bipartisan work. Republicans in both the House and the Senate have been the main sponsors of the bills. As in Missouri, we are a supermajority in both chambers. But Democrats are supportive and are helping behind the scenes to move it forward. This year, we've been working to encourage the Department of Social. Sorry, I'm going to jump down now to the Elderly Simplified Application Project. And this is something that we're doing administratively rather than having to deal with legislatively. So building those relationships with the Department of Social Services is really helping us in this area. We've been working to encourage the Department of Social Services to submit an application for a demonstration project, the Elderly Simplified Application Project. And like I said, it's an instance where we found that working administratively with the department can make it easier to make changes rather than working through legislation. And Salaam pretty much gave an overview. It seeks to increase participation among older adults, 60 years and older, low-income population that are facing barriers to SNAP, designed to increase the efficiency. And it's limited to households where all members are older adults with no earned income. And there are some what's the word I'm looking for? Exemptions from that. Yeah, and then it allows them to only have to recertify every 3 years rather than every single year because their income's not changing. And the waiver, if accepted, is good for a period of 5 years. So those are two of the things. And then I think on the next slide, we'll get into one of the other things that we're working on. Do you want me just to go?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so another important and widely adopted state option that can be done administratively is broad-based categorical eligibility. This map is showing you in green all of the states that have already adopted this, and the blue states, including Missouri, are states that have not. We are working on it. It enables states to raise the SNAP income eligibility limit when families have significant expenses in areas such as childcare. This policy also lets states adopt less restrictive asset tests so that families, seniors, and people with disabilities can start to have modest savings without losing SNAP. It's beyond the scope of this webinar, but a benefits cliff is an issue, and we do a lot of work trying to mitigate the problems associated with that as well. BBC reduces the complexity of the SNAP application process for states, so the departments, and households. And it lowers something called churn, which occurs when SNAP households stop participating in SNAP for procedural reasons or because they briefly become ineligible, and then they have to reapply within a very short period. And it just creates added work for state workers and then benefit gaps for the SNAP households. Yeah, that was my notes that I have to say on that.
Yeah, and this is an image from the State Options Report. So it's going to be outdated very soon because Alaska passed broad-based categorical eligibility, and they will begin rolling it. They're going to start on July 1 of this year. So great job, Alaska. We're making the whole country green here. And also BBCE, known in there's so many different phrases for it. Broad-based categorical eligibility, BBCE. SNAP expansion is also a phrase that people use when it comes to this wonkiness. Now, we talked about how many people SNAP has helped. Again, it's always important to note that it's 42 million people, over 42 million people, every single month are utilizing SNAP benefits. And what's important to note about that as well is that it's the benefits are typically used within 3 weeks of receipt. That's a really quick investment into the entirety of America. We also know that the breakdown of who's receiving SNAP, it's typically between 2019 and 2023, we saw that 39% of participating households were older adults, 47%, nearly 50% of the participating households had children, nearly 50% also had a person with a disability, and 80%, that's a huge number, 80% included at least one worker. So oftentimes we'll hear, the stigma or stereotype associated with people who have low incomes, that they are just playing video games on their parents' couches. That's the current rhetoric right now. But in actuality, 80% include at least one worker. And this was really important to see. This is something that we can see from the 2019 to the 2023 ACS, American Community Survey data. It shows us on a long-term scale. because on a 1 year data, you don't have enough of a sample size. On a 5 year scale, you can better see that, there might be some months, there might be a year where somebody's out of work looking for a job or something. And it shows better how people are able to find jobs. There's a map of the percent of population residing who are receiving SNAP benefits the fiscal year 2023. Like you can see where the densities are. So yeah, another important thing for advocates to talk about when speaking to SNAP is the economic impact. And this is huge, especially when you're talking in a purple or a red state. Oftentimes, you got to reframe the advocacy. So one of the things to highlight, a very important aspect, is that every dollar in SNAP benefits generates up to $1.80 in economic activity during a downturn. You may have seen other stats saying up to $1.54, but there is, in the same report that brings out $1.54, it also cites to $1.80. And this is something that we'll especially see in rural parts of the country, where the connection between people and vendors and farmers is a lot closer than in metro areas. So this $1.80 up to during a downturn, what it means is that it helps grocery stores, convenience stores keep the lights on. It keeps people employed. We have a lot of statistics coming out showing how many people remain employed through SNAP. It helps pay for the truck driver who's transporting the food. It helps pay for the payment processors, like the banks that are processing the payment behind the scenes. It helps pay for the retailer that's labeling the food. And ultimately, it's helping pay the farmer who's growing the food. So it's a wonderful investment from within 3 weeks of receipt that the whole entire economy is able to benefit from. So that's a really critical point to message when you're out there advocating. It also reduces healthcare costs on an average of $1,400. So that's really important to highlight as well, that this, just by providing people with food assistance, it has an incredible ripple effect in reducing costs in so many other places as well. Unfortunately, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, can't score the reduction in Medicaid funding based on increasing SNAP funding, but we know the research is out there that shows increased SNAP benefits actually decreases healthcare spending, which is fantastic. Well, Amanda, anything to add?
Yeah, I did. So Missouri is exceptionally rural. And like I said, prior to working with Empower Missouri, I had not done a lot in policy work. And so when I began this position, I thought really all I needed to do was find conclusive evidence, right? Because I'm a data research person, that the policies that I and my organization were advocating for would benefit people. And then legislators would fight over who could sponsor our bills, and getting them passed would just, be easy breezy, a simple matter. And I was unaware sometimes how Republican supermajorities, conservative mindsets can impact advocacy for human rights issues. Every person, I just think it's important to keep in mind that every person you encounter has a different method that may move them. And for many, a story of a personal impact or peer-reviewed supportive research may indeed be the superlative angle to win somebody over to your cause. But I've also come to realize that with some personalities, especially those of conservative natures, we as advocates may have to take an approach that isn't necessarily how we were trained, what we were trained to do, or where our hearts and minds may naturally go. This past legislative session, I worked really hard to expand access to free school meals. But despite having conclusive data on the short and long-term benefits and support from a lot of people with lived experience, I still faced a legislator who told me that many people believe that parents just need to do better. And sometimes it feels like when I would start talking about hungry children, people would just check out. And so this experience and also listening to the hearings and the floor debates led me to realize that I need to reformulate my language and that I should probably come up with an economic impact pitch. Sometimes we should keep in mind that the best language could be a cost to benefit scenario. And although that may feel foreign, it may be exactly what you need to get through to who you need to get through to. And so digging through the history and the data, finding what the economic cost of a policy will be, and using that as an advocacy strategy can sometimes be exactly the language you need to communicate. That was what I wanted to pitch in on that.
Thanks. And I see some questions about the $1,400 reference. There was a study that was done by the National Health Interview Survey, and they surveyed just over 4,000 adults with income below 200% of the federal poverty line. And they found that on average, there was a reduction in a year, in the year of $1,400 healthcare spending on average per person. Right. And then also one of the things that we can do as advocates is create diverse coalitions. Oftentimes we may just focus on anti-hunger organizations, and that may not be enough, especially in a red or a purple state. Unfortunately, just as Amanda said, sometimes just the anti-hunger messaging isn't enough. It's not enough that SNAP is helping feed people who need food, but it's really important to also build out your diverse coalition. So in Virginia, when I was a state advocate there, at the Virginia Poverty Law Center, we built out a coalition that not only included the anti-hunger folks and child nutrition folks, but also we brought in health insurance people. We brought in the county and the city organizations as well. We brought in banks. We brought in grocery stores and retail organizations to really come as a one unified organization. And this was in furtherance of broad-based categorical eligibility. So when we came in as that full force, that really opened up the eyes of the state legislature. And we were finally able to pass broad-based categorical eligibility unanimously in Virginia based on that diverse coalition. So something super important to do and could very help change the course so much, whether it's legislative or administrative advocacy you're doing. Bring as many different players to the table, and you'll be really surprised to see how much great you can do. Of course, have the pre-meetings beforehand. Oh, yep. So diverse coalitions taking care of that. Amanda, you want to talk about people with lived experience?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a little biased, but Empower Missouri works to secure basic human needs and equal justice for every person in our state through coalition building and advocacy. That is literally our mission statement. So building diverse coalitions, in my opinion, is imperative to successful advocacy. I'm fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to attain an education that allows me to make doing this, I can make a livable wage by doing this work. However, I am by no means the best, and some of the best advocates may have no training, may have little or no experience in doing this type of work. And so I, view myself as somebody who is there to help them get what they need to do that. Having lived experience is a perspective that can't be taught. And often, if people are willing to share their experiences and the wisdom gained from that, it can lend insight that may otherwise remain invisible. It's easy to fall into a pattern of collaborating with other advocacy professionals during normal business hours, but it does leave out a majority of voices. So SNAP, for instance, since we're discussing SNAP and the 42 million Americans that are participating in that program, I know that most of those participants who are able to work, which Salaam had just showed on that slide, they do work. And that means that many of them will be able to attend the meetings that I'm hosting during business hours, despite the fact that much of the work that I'm doing right now is going to directly impact them. So one of the efforts that I've made to include those with lived experience is to host meetings in the evenings. One of our coalitions at Empower Missouri is the Affordable Housing Coalition, and they meet with their tenant organizing groups on weekends. And so sometimes I just view myself as a bullhorn, and I take the task of putting it in the hands and up to the mouths of as many people as possible very seriously. And so trying to just think outside of the box, making sure that we're inviting people to the table that are not just in our professional networks, and then having times to get together that are that they're able to come to the table during that time. Thank you.
Right. And now comes time for the, essentially you could say $300 billion question. What's going on these days? So all of this that we've talked about should help inform what we're about to talk about. And we'll still, we'll keep it in 101 terms. So reconciliation is happening. This is really, the House is going to present its own budget. And it's going to go over to the Senate. The Senate's going to tear it apart, and then they're going to try to reconcile at some point before August. That's called reconciliation. So far, what have we seen? We've seen a proposal start in House Agriculture Committee. Last week, they voted on that, and it came out of that committee on party lines. And then it moved to the Budget Committee on Friday. They weren't able to resolve it on Friday, and they met through the weekend. And then on Sunday, it was bundled up with Medicaid. And so on Sunday, they were able to move it out of that committee. And then it moved to rules. And that's going to happen tonight at 1 a.m. So if you want to take some espresso shots right now to be able to pull an all-nighter to watch that, go for it. And so that's going to start at 1 a.m. And it's going to be really, it's really awful to see that it's happening overnight. So the Rules Committee is going to look into it. And then it should be on the floor by the end of the week if it passes out of the committee. It will be on the floor by the end of the week. The House is trying to get this done before Memorial Day break. Then once that happens, then it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate's going to tear it apart. Oh, that's what they say. So, but what are they going to tear apart? What are they looking at? So there's three major things that are happening here, and they're adding up to, all of these cuts are adding up to just a little over $290 billion, which is a nearly 30% cut of the entire program. This is the largest cut the program has ever faced. And if these cuts go through, it will change the program forever. One of the ways that the party wants to, or the administration wants to change it, well, not the administration, but the party, it's changing time limits. So changing the work requirements in two different ways. Right now, the upper age limit of the time limit is 54. This increase to 54 happened in 2023 because originally it was 49, between ages of 18 and 49 for able-bodied adults without dependents, for the ABODs. Remember that 3-month time limit within 36 months. So it increased from 49 to 54 up until last year was when 54 finally rolled out in the phased out approach, or phased in approach. And it was supposed to sunset in October 2030. It was supposed to go back down to 49. Well, what what this proposal says is that we're not just going to go from 54 to 64, but we're going to make that permanent. You think about how hard it is to find a job these days, and how much harder it's going to be for somebody within the older adult bracket of 54 to 64, how much harder it's going to be for them to find a job, especially with all the age discrimination that actually happens out there in reality, but also understanding that they have health issues that may not count as a full disability. They might not have the skill set to work in this rapidly changing economy. Oftentimes we've heard rhetoric from some Congress members that it should be very easy to find a desk job, but we know that those are not the jobs that are going to be available for them. So it's really out of touch remarks that we're seeing. So it's really important to highlight what this could mean for older adults. The other way the time limit is seeking to be changed is changing the definition of what is considered to be a dependent or a child. Right now, it's children who are under the age of 18. If you have somebody who is a dependent at that age, then you're not required to do the work. You can still receive SNAP without being, you're exempt from the ABOD limit. What this proposal will do is decrease the age of a dependent child all the way down to 7 or below. So that would mean that if you are a single parent, you will be forced to work to receive and continue to be eligible for SNAP benefits. You'd have to work 80 hours a month, 20 hours a week to be able to continue to receive SNAP benefits. And the practically speaking, to find a job as a single parent that is child friendly and will accommodate for when your child suddenly gets sick, or when childcare is unavailable, or when summer breaks and spring breaks and snow days happen, it's going to be very hard to find that. And when it comes to that, if you were able to find a job like that and they required you to have after-school childcare, well, we know how expensive after-school childcare is. So essentially what would be happening is you'd receive a paycheck and then it would just go to the childcare agency. All for what? To not be able to see your child much? It's not a fair trade-off at all. So what this would in effect do is that if somebody is unable to meet those time limits, then they are removed from the household for calculating the SNAP benefit amount. So if it's a single mom with 2 kids, then that household of 3 becomes a household of 2. And so those benefit amounts drop and food insecurity will increase in that household as they have no or very low income as a result as well. So it's a very unfortunate thing that we're seeing here, and it's very important that we keep pushing back against this proposed cut. The other thing is a twofold thing known as the cost shift. So this is also very troubling and very concerning, and here's why. We talked about the funding structure of SNAP administration and the benefit itself. Those two are both getting impacted. Both of those are getting impacted in this proposal, and here's how. The administration of SNAP right now is 50-50. The proposal right now suggests the SNAP administration for the state increased to 75%, and the federal government's decreases to 25%. That is extra tens of millions of dollars a year for states to have to put up. And if you're a state advocate, then you know your state does not have the budget for this. And that's on the lower amount. Then when it comes to the cost shift for the benefits, this is seeking to put in a 5% minimum shift for the benefits. And if you look at our state fact sheets, and we'll link them into the chat if they haven't already, it's showing how much is coming into each state in SNAP benefits. So even if you took 5% of that, it's a huge number that state budgets will not be able to accommodate. One of the things to keep in mind about that benefit cost shift is that it will increase based on payment error rates. So and it can go as high as 25% of the benefit share being shifted over to the states. So if you do a 25% look, it's bad. What's also important to consider is that there's a part of the proposal that says there's currently a grace error rate. There's a grace payment error rate. So if right now it's $57 or below. If a family received $5 too less or $10 too much for some reason, that's not considered a payment error. Now it would be considered a payment error. We all know the formula is very complex. It requires skilled merit-based staff to figure out who's eligible and how much they will receive in benefits. It's a very complicated formula. It's a very burdensome formula, and mistakes are going to happen, especially in all these state agencies that are underfunded and understaffed. So it's really not helping these state agencies to shore up their resources and prevent payment errors. If anything, it's going to make sure more payment errors happen so that more states have to go into the 15, 20, 25% category. And I was talking with a state advocate. He actually spoke with a state agency to see what that error rate would look like if the grace payment error was removed. So you couldn't talk to your state agency to get those numbers and really see how much this could impact your state budget. It's really important to talk to your state lawmakers right now about this. State lawmakers, governors, budget folks from states have not been speaking up against these cost shifts. They were saying they were waiting for some sort of tangible thing to see so that they could speak out against it. But we knew as advocates that once that's out, it's going to be too late. And it's kind of too late. But really, we really need to be speaking out. On the state legislators need to be speaking out. Governors need to be speaking out. And they should be letting Congress know that they cannot afford this cost shift. So when it comes to a cost shift, they say that it's not a SNAP cut. It's the same thing. Cost shifts are SNAP cuts because Congress is passing the buck to the states so that when people get upset about these shifts happening, Congress can say it wasn't us, it was the state that did it. One of the very concerning things about the cost shift for administration is that states are going to pull back on the program to make it cheaper. So one of the first things that will get impacted most likely that we anticipate is broad-based categorical eligibility, a program that helps thousands, tens of thousands and more people receive SNAP who really need it. States will pull back on that to make the program much cheaper. And what happens when entire families are removed from the program? Then children, if they are removed from the program, would lose their direct certification to free school meals. And also children under 5 will lose their adjunctive eligibility for WIC. So if somebody is also trying to tell you that there's no impact from these cuts on school meals, you got to let them know this as well. These cuts will not have a ripple effect. They will have a shockwave across entire economies and households and families and schools. And the third big one is the Thrifty Food Plan. We talked really early on about how the Thrifty Food Plan is the formula for the SNAP benefit amount, and how in 2018 it had an amazing moment where it was updated for the first time in 49 years. Up until then, it always had a cost-neutral update, meaning that any changes to the Thrifty Food Plan didn't actually change the benefit. And so as a result, the SNAP benefit was constantly losing its purchasing power. So what we saw happen in 2021, when the benefit adjustment was updated to the current dietary guidelines and current consumption patterns and what people are buying that's available in stores, it saw the average daily benefit go from $4.80 to $6.16. So that's a modest step in the right direction. We still have a long way to go, but that's where that's what we saw. But that angered a lot of people, unfortunately. And so the proposal includes freezing the Thrifty Food Plan moving forward, because 2018 Farm Bill said it would be adjusted every 5 years based on current things. But now the proposal wants it to be frozen, so we wouldn't see those benefits adjusted moving forward. And this is projected to be a $37 billion cut over the next decade. Now, when it comes to SNAP cuts, when people see it doesn't look like SNAP cuts, but it is SNAP cuts. There was a Washington Post story that came out in December where there was this community that was low income and relies on SNAP. They voted in favor of the current administration. And they knew that these cuts were coming, but they thought they were administrative cuts. They thought they were bureaucracy cuts, like there's $200 billion in paperwork that can be reduced. But that's not the case. There is no way that bureaucracy can be decreased and reach $290 billion in cuts. These cuts are coming for benefits, they're coming for people, and they're going to be removing those folks from that. So it's really important to let people know this is not going to increase your benefits in any way, shape, or form. It's going to do the exact opposite. Somebody asked about skimming, and oh man, we are in the final couple minutes. Wow, so many great questions so far, and wow, so much to talk about. So all right, so skimming, huge problem right now, and it's been a problem for the past couple of years. You may remember there was a temporary benefit replacement that ended in December of last year, right before the holiday season, which was incredibly unfortunate. The reality is that we almost had a 4-year extension to benefit replacements. We almost had it. It was in the final draft, and then something happened and it disappeared. So there was bipartisan support for it, but right now it's really no man's land for skimming. We see these skimming devices continuing to be put on point of sale systems. SNAP participants are getting their benefits stolen at the point of sale, and it's a really awful scenario that's happening right now across the country. So what we're seeing is that the U.S. government complains about this as if they are powerless to do something about it, when really they're not. We're the most powerful nation in human history. We can't just sit around with twiddling our thumbs. We have amazing opportunities with priority legislation, and one of those is the Enhanced Cybersecurity for SNAP Act, which would require the privacy standards for the security standards for SNAP to be kept up with every 5 years compared to what's going on in the private sector. So we're really advancing that and pushing for that. The Fairness for Victims of Skimming Act would also benefit those who have been skimmed from permanently. Now, we know that as of late last year, the standards were rolled out to transition from the swipe card to the chip card. And some states, California, Oklahoma, are the first two to consider moving forward in that direction. California has rolled out some chip cards already. But we know that the chip card is not the solution. It'll take care of a lot of skimming and a lot of the theft, but we know that criminals are creative. They're going to keep trying to steal and be successful in some way, shape, or form. So we want to have a permanent replacement so that people have some sort of safety net for when they are victimized. And we could talk more about priority legislation later on. But really, high level, what's next? We really want to talk about a vision beyond SNAP. What are we fighting for overall? We really want a just economy, living wages, affordable housing, accessible healthcare. That all comes together when we're working towards not just a safety net, but a long-term solution as well. So I apologize. We ran the clock here. But what we'll do is we'll work with Stephen to get all the questions, and when we do send out the materials, recording and the PowerPoint slides, we'll also maybe try to put like an FAQ together so that we can best answer your questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and letting us know. Please let us know if there's other resources that can be helpful as we continue to think about other one-on-one topics that we can do. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, have a great day.